outside of Cardano, outside of all the deals, the partnerships, crypto, YouTube interviews like this one, the news, the noise, the Charles that's just kind of hanging out in the farm, the ranch. What is your favorite part of life? Like, how is life, number one, but what's your favorite part of life outside crypto?
That's a great question. It's a good way to open it. You know, the problem with being an entrepreneur is that you start obsessed with something and it becomes kind of your life mission, and you go and follow that. And then these concepts like work-life balance, health, sanity, they go out the window, and you're just really pushing and pushing and pushing. And then what ends up happening if you start succeeding is that you start getting more blessings and fortunes, and then you get into a position where you can go up for air, and you find that you're a bit asymmetrical as a person. So certain parts of yourself get hyper developed, like your ability to solve complex problems and public speaking and your ability to perform well under stress. But then other things like your interpersonal relationships and potentially your capacity to express emotions and empathy, other such things maybe got stunted because you underdeveloped them. You kind of put them on hold for 5, 10 years while you're building your company. So what I've been trying to do in the last few years has been take some time to really develop up that corpus. So I've been meditating a lot more. I went to a silent meditation retreat for a whole week, and I bought the ranch and I raised bison, and I've been trying really hard to connect to the earth, and so I grow a lot of stuff. For everything from mycological endeavors where I grow lion's mane to hydroponic crops to hay in the fields, these types of things, and it grounds you a lot. The other thing is I've been trying very heavily to improve empathy and my ability to relate and communicate with people, because I think there's a huge deficit for that in the world. So I try to find ways to just put myself in other people's shoes and, try to relate to them, in some cases work with them. And I also have a lot of old passions that I had to put on the coat hanger. Like, for example, video games. When I was a kid, that was a big part of my life. And most people can relate. And then, become an entrepreneur, first to academia, you don't have time for it. You're busy studying and these things. And then you become an entrepreneur, you don't have time for it. You're busy building a company. So it's been good to kind of get back into that a little bit and say, okay, well, I can't be there like I used to, but maybe I can be there in a different way that's somehow synergistic to the entire lifestyle. So any given week, it's always something different. And I just got back from Las Vegas, for example. I was at the Consumer Electronics Expo, and there was like a Cardano reason. There were some NFT players there, but also it was biomedical. I was there with my dad and brother. They're both doctors, and we spent a lot of time just going through talking to people do biosensors and all these other things, and just seeing the state of the art there. And it was so cool to be talking with my dad and my brother, and having a discussion. How could we apply this for health and wellness and improve people's lives? And actually see the future. We'd always been talking about these things like real-time continuous glucose monitors or other things, and now they're there. They exist, and you can say, okay, well, now that we have them, what do we do with them? And so those are the kinds of things I do for fun, and they add a lot of value to my life, and they give me a lot of grounding and clarity, and they help me kind of manage the negativity and toxicity and damage that cryptocurrencies tend to inflict on people. It's a very unusual industry where you get brutalized. It's almost like being a politician, and you have to go through this cleansing and detox and kind of reset your soul in a certain respect, because every week is so brutal.
It really, it really is. I can definitely relate to that. And you were just talking about that retreat, the meditation retreat you went on, and I read your blog post on that, and like the thing that stuck out to me the most was you wrote like this paragraph or two about a salt shaker. And like I had a similar experience. I was in a diner like a long time ago, but I totally related to what you were writing about, and you were trying to kind of describe, I think, you were analyzing the salt shaker, of course, but you were also talking about like the people that are actually behind that little salt shaker, right? And if you look around and there's people, there's human beings around like everything around us. And like that humanity of it, and I've been trying to grasp this, is kind of like overlaps with what you were just talking about, like bringing that. into the crypto space, because the crypto space is really toxic. Like, it's something I've grown to really realize. And I was having a conversation with somebody just, I think, yesterday about it. And it's kind of like, sometimes I'm like, what am I doing here? Spending all day like on Twitter and YouTube and doing crypto stuff
Right.
when it's all this negativity. Like, what am I dealing with this? There's like a life out there. There's people to serve, there's people to help. But then I kind of backtrack. And this is where, long story short, I want your thoughts here. How do you bring what you were talking about, that salt shaker, the people behind that, right? How do you bring that into crypto, like that, the humanity of it, the humanness that is out there? How can we do that, to bridge the gap?
Yeah, yeah, it's one I've thought about a lot too. You know, a lot of people say, well, "Why are you talking about toxicity? Suck it up, Buttercup." Well, if you're that materialistic and that much of an asshole, I'll sell it to you this way: it hurts your investment. Toxicity prevents more people from coming in. It prevents the growth of the ecosystem. Who the hell wants to go to a bar when they walk in the front door? There's a bar fight. You're like, nah, I'm gonna turn around and go somewhere else because I don't want none of this. You know, if you have immensely negative, toxic people everywhere and everything is so politicized and factioned, and the minute you step in, like for example, Fortune 500 adoption, we live in a situation in this industry right now that if a company like Microsoft or Apple decides to do a blockchain project, they will get from day one brutalized for not picking blockchain X or Y and for picking blockchain Z. Normally when you do a product announcement, you're excited. It's wow, they're doing this innovative thing, Microsoft HoloLens. And they say, how dare you run that on Ethereum? How dare you run that on Bitcoin or something like that? So as a Fortune 500 company, you start thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't do anything in this crypto space. So you've just now denied our industry as a whole tens of millions of new users who will float around and have preferences across the board. So even if Samsung or Microsoft or Google pick blockchain X, by bringing their user base there, they've just brought in 10 million new crypto users or something like that, or a billion. And that's good for us all. But you can't get past that with the maximalism and the toxicity. They can't see beyond that. And so you ask, well, how do you bring it in? This weekend I did something new. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. I was just about to go to bed, and I figured, hey, it'd be fun to do one of these Twitter spaces for 10, 20 minutes. And so I just said, chat with Charles, and I created it. I had 1,600 people within 5 minutes inside the Twitter space at 1 o'clock in the morning, Mountain Standard Time. I ended up speaking for 3 hours, and it was great. Really positive experience. A lot of love there. A lot of good people there. So I think part of the experience is understanding that the vast majority of people in the cryptocurrency ecosystem are not toxic and are not bad people, and they're just silent. And so they get drowned out by these very radicalized subset of people who, frankly, they're not happy about anything, no matter what you accomplish or what you do. And so you don't pay attention to one group and pay attention to the other. That's one side of it. The other thing is you always have to understand the root cause of why people have issues. What's their hidden pain or their issue? A lot of these criticisms are projections. They don't have confidence in themselves or projects, or they're concerned about something, so they try to project it onto others in some way to alleviate the issue. There is some legitimate criticism. I mean, if you're too slow or something like that, and that's the issue more of values. So, a lot of people feel, for example, Cardano's too slow to market. Okay. Uh, but we could be real quick to market and half our software can't work. Would that be okay? Would it be okay if every week we had $1 billion stolen, or something like that, like what we're seeing in the industry as a whole? Would that be an acceptable outcome? But we ship software 5 times faster, and then you have to ask yourself, well, what are the values behind that? When people say you're too slow, well, it's because they want money. They figured if you get a larger network effect, the token price goes up, and then they can get a Lamborghini. So are they really doing anyone any service or any good if the vision, mission, and goals are about changing the world, not about making a speculator rich? So you have to categorize the toxicity and the criticism and understand the root cause of it. Is it a concern or an issue? Is it just personal greed? Is it a misunderstanding? Is it tribalism? Whatever it happens to be. And then just communicate with people the self-defeating nature of what they're doing and how they're communicating, and say, look, we can go down this road. You're not going to win, but let's say we go down this road. At the end of the day, all you're doing is hurting the ecosystem as a whole. and just try to change perspective. Like if you know a really negative person, what you do is you say, they come in, oh, my knee hurts, my back hurts. Ah, Biden did this. We all know that Debbie Downer. And so what you do is you take them aside and say, tell me one positive thing. And it
Yeah,
knocks them out. And they're like, now I
I
have to
love
think
it.
of something positive, right? And sometimes it's super hard. They spend like 5 minutes just like thinking about it. And then eventually they say something and mumble it under their breath and say, there, that's a start. So you see, and I have one person I know so negative. Every time I run into him, I say, I'm not going to talk to you unless you tell me something positive. So the first thing out of their mouth has to be saying, it could be, it's a nice day today. There we go. And they always try to put like a negative spin to it. It's a nice day today, but the weather is going to get bad. No, you just stop it at nice day. That's it.
I love that. I love that approach. Tell me one good thing, or I'm not going to
Right,
talk to you.
right.
That's awesome. All right. So, well, I appreciate your thoughts on that. It's such a good point, and I like the twist of the spaces you did. I think I was sleeping when you were doing that, but that was cool. I saw that you did that. Cardano. Um, I want to read this thing you wrote. It was in December 2017. I want to get your thoughts on it.
Sure.
You were writing about the progress of Cardano, which was, in December 2017, and you said this. You said, "I've never been here for the short term. It's always been the dream of finding a way to get financial services to the 3 billion people who don't have them, using technology that was only a dream a generation ago. And I think we're making great progress here." So that was like shortly after the Byron era, I guess, launched, right?
Right.
And you mentioned you're making great progress. Now here we are, like a little over 4 years. I want to ask you now, how is it progressing?
Ah, well, let's look at what we accomplished. We went from a static and federated system that didn't have smart contracts, that had a very small community, had a very little liquidity, to an ecosystem in the top 10 with, over 100 exchanges, 2 million people, 130 dApps being built, 2 million assets issued on it. We've gone from the Byron era to the Shelley era to the Goguen era successfully. We've never had a major downtime in the network history. Hundreds of billions of dollars of value have been moved in the year 2021. And we also have written 130 academic papers. We defined the entire science of proof of stake. And we learned an enormous amount along the way about new development models, like, for example, extended UTXO, which is the only way, in my view, to bring smart contracts to Bitcoin. And it enables things like Mithril and Hydra in short order. So I think a lot's been accomplished. And when people look back at all of that, they'd say, okay, if somebody told you we'd achieve all of that in a 4-year period, would you take that deal? They say, of course. And they'd say, you're crazy to see that kind of growth and that kind of systematic effort and so forth. But what they do is they get so caught on the narrow and say, well, smart contracts were supposed to be here, or decentralization is supposed to be here. We had to rewrite the software 3 times. There were major changes in architecture and vendors. There were approaches that were taken that didn't work out. There were course delays. Well, Vitalik said that in 2015, he said Ethereum 2 was going to come out in 2018. Worst case scenario, and it's 2022. He's saying maybe 2025. So does that mean everything Ethereum's ever done and achieved is bad? No, it's just the nature of the game, and there's things you learn along the way. In some cases, you're overly optimistic. There were product and project management methodologies we were following that we thought would properly estimate things. Turned out they were wrong. People behind that aren't here anymore. We have completely different ways of running product and project management. We're far more accurate. When we have delays, they're usually in the months or weeks, not in the years in these types of things, which means we're converging. Now, what's nice, though, is one thing that's never been wavering has been the product market fit, and we've made enormous progress there. I'll get into that in a second. But then also the clarity that the science has brought us. We don't sit around wondering, gosh, how do we scale? Gosh, how do we make this secure? Gosh, how do we know this is going to work? No, we already know. We have enormous advantages in our network stack design, enormous advantages in our consensus protocol design. We know the limitations of the system and the robustness of it. So it's not a matter of if, but simply how long will it take to roll out. So when we look at things like pipelining import endorsers, You have all these people running around, DAG this, DAG that, DAG this, third generation this, super high TPS. Well, input endorsers effectively does that for you. And that was something we came up with in 2016. And we had a follow-up paper in 2018, parallel chains. Both went through peer review. So we know the science is settled. We have a really good understanding of it. We know how to build it. So, and we know that we're now in a position where it can be built because the foundations are mature enough to be able to roll these types of things out. So there are very few projects in this space that have so much clarity about how to put all the pieces together, from how to get great user experience in like clients, to how to do microtransactions, to how to accelerate the base ledger. And a lot of people say, well, you're just taking Charles's word for it. It's like, well, no, we wrote 130 papers and there's an army of engineers and all these other things. We did all the work up front. And if we hadn't done that, then it would be just like Vitalik with his prognostications about, Ethereum 2 and Casper, where they keep doing it until they run into a roadblock. Then they have to throw it all away and keep doing it until they run into a roadblock and throw it all away. We don't quite run into that. So I think this year is going to be our most productive year. And, people on Twitter, they like putting up that quote where I made a prediction about the amount of dApps and assets. Well, I was wrong in both directions. I was under optimistic about assets. There's 2 million assets that have been issued on Cardano. I was overly optimistic on the amount of dApps, but to be fair, we have 130 under construction. And we're in the infancy of Plutus, and we haven't even turned on all the Ethereum interoperability. So if you look at that projection and you project it out the year, if that keeps going with Catalyst support, we're probably going to be right in that projection. All right, it was off by about a year. Does that materially change the protocol? Does that materially change the science? Does that materially change the use and utility? And then on to Africa. We did the Africa tour last year. We went South Africa and Burundi and Zanzibar and Ethiopia and Kenya and Egypt. And we put ourselves in a great position over the last 4 years to actually start realizing what I was talking about, the TED Talk in 2014. There has been an enduring consistency in our messaging, vision, and philosophy about this project. We've never wavered once. We said 3 billion people, let's go find them, let's get them in. And we have a beautiful approach to do that. We brought millions on board with Prism, B2B2C acquisitions. We have great partners on the ground that we're actively working with in Africa, nation states we're working with. So there's an inevitability that we get a shot at the vision of changing the lives of billions of people as an ecosystem. And we know the technology is fit for purpose because we built it that way. Everything from the metadata standards to the Prism-based identity standards to how we approach scale, how we approach participation. The other thing is the people in the ecosystem care about the mission. You think about growth, you have to ask yourself, who are you inviting into your house? If you get people in, the only thing they care about is making money, speed, and cost. Then if you go to them and say, hey, let's hyper-centralize the system and give Amazon total control, and you'll save 25%, they'll be like, where do we sign up? We love money. So you have to be really careful with how you grow and how you indoctrinate the philosophy of the system, just like Bitcoin was. No one was money motivated in the early days of Bitcoin because there was no money to make. Bitcoin was worthless. There were StarCraft tournaments where your fifth prize, your consolation prize was 25 Bitcoin. Your first prize was $100. I mean, if you, I got these worthless Bitcoin things. What the hell are those, right? But it grew into this Goliath because it was born of principles. And so when you look at your initial population, you have to say, where do they come from? What's your churn rate? What are your growth factors? And one of the things that people cannot deny is the strength of the Cardano community, the passion of that community, the philosophy, the philosophical purity of that community, and the fact that most people here just want to do the right thing and they want to change the world. And they're comfortable with the idea that they're not a passive, but rather an active participant there. We have this saying in Cardano, grab a shovel. Get it done. Go out there, plant some trees. And we see the stake pool operators doing clean water projects. We see people doing healthcare projects, charity projects. Some are faith-based. Some are philosophy. Some are setting up NGOs. There's a SPO down in South America that's feeding children in Argentina. Everybody is finding something to do, some way to help, and use this system to do so. And as the tooling and capability of the system grows, that's only going to increase. And people are participating in droves with Catalyst. We have the largest decentralized organization in the world running the distribution of funds for the treasury of Cardano. every round. The participation metrics go up. The amount of funded ventures go up. We're over 300. And those will bear fruit in their own right and lay the lands for 1,000 flowers. So I feel very strong. I feel we're in a very strong position. And I think we've made enormous progress, especially when you zoom out a little bit and you look at where we were at and how weak we were to how strong we are now and how fast it's all coming together. And the fact that every aspect is covered by some paper or piece of technology that we know works. And it's just an inevitable matter of getting all those pieces together. And if winning means you have to compromise on quality and have $10.5 billion of hacks a year and not care about people and surrender to centralization or reset the network anytime it breaks manually, I don't want to win. I'd much rather lose with some integrity. And frankly, I think it's neither. I think we're going to win with integrity because that's ultimately what crypto is all about. That's the point of crypto, is the principles of it, or else you're just building another legacy system and trading Goldman Sachs for Ethereum or Goldman Sachs for Newcoin or something like that. What the hell's the point? It makes no sense.
I think it's a good testimony of the blockchain itself to see, as you were mentioning, all the different mission related things that are growing out of this technology. And that's one of the things that really intrigues me about it, what it can be used for. I think about World Mobile a lot when we start talking about that. So World Mobile, Zanzibar, you touched on Ethiopia. The path to 1 billion users, 1 billion plus users, 3 billion users. Is that like that type of thing what's going to get Cardano there? Or are there many different arms in that story?
Yeah, there's tons of arms, and it's not a unilateral path where I'm going to figure it all out. I have a particular itch to scratch, which is the developing world. That's what I'm going to go do, along with some other things. And every now and then we stumble upon a Fortune 500 like Dish that wants to come in and work with us, and we say, great, it's very exciting. But then there are other people like the foundation. They're going to try to onboard 50 banks, and there are other people who are onboarding their local community and doing community-based projects or building companies like Sunday Swap, for example, on the ecosystem. And then if the technology is great, it's better, faster, and cheaper than most of the people in the space, if not all of them. So people are just cost conscious will come in. And there are other people where they have assurance requirements that only Cardano can satisfy. So they'll come in. So it takes a village. And this is not one company sitting down figuring this out. Your path to 1 billion is a multi-model and a multi-agency model, just like Bitcoin, where everybody feels some form of accountability. In the early days of Bitcoin, BitPay sponsored the St. Petersburg Bowl. It became the Bitcoin Bowl. In the early days of Bitcoin, Roger Ver was going around convincing barbers and coffee shops to accept Bitcoin, and he wouldn't leave until they took the Bitcoin. I mean, there was so many different people from all walks of life. Andreas Antonopoulos going on Joe Rogan's podcast, doing Mastering Bitcoin. Eric Voorhees doing Shapeshift, these types of things. So everybody has a place and a role, and great ecosystems give people the freedom and luxury to have a place and a role and to feel comfortable like they're welcomed and included. And bad ecosystems, they start taking that away from you, telling you what you have to do, and you feel like only one person can solve all the problems. That's not right. So we have some strategies, I think, that can get a lot of great user acquisitions. Beautiful light client experience, getting it in the browser, and making sure that you have a beautiful dApp store combined with a great voting center and really nice identity. Furthermore, Catalyst is going to be extended to give you voting and governance tools for the dApps and native assets that are issued on Cardano, as much as Cardano enjoys. So in DeFi, there's a huge surge, especially when regulation comes for it, to decentralize. And you need governance for that. So that means all these DeFi protocols have to basically figure out how to write voting protocols and become governance experts and all these other things. Well, what if you get that for free, incumbent in the platform itself? That's a huge competitive advantage when people are migrating, because at the end of the day, they're not loyal to the underlying infrastructure. They don't wake up and say, boy, how do I make Joe Lubin and Vitalik rich today? Nobody says that. They're just using it because it has network effect and it's a means to an end, but it comes with a lot of trade-offs. And at some point you have to migrate. And so either they go layer one and build their own chain, or they go to a different chain. And so, the question is, are the USPs appealing enough? And over time, they become that way. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. Just because you have great network effect today, one of my favorite ways of explaining the value of network effect in technology is saying, if you really believe that's a big deal, I tell you what, pull out your BlackBerry phone, Okay, go to Yahoo and search for your MySpace page. Go ahead and find it and log in with your AOL account. And then post on MySpace your feelings about all of it on your Windows computer. you know, I
Man,
mean
getting me all nostalgic over here.
yeah, I know that's network effect, right? And
Yeah.
at one point, all of those were the market leader. Okay, they had all the power, and now they're all gone. So network effect is ephemeral in technology, and it's connected directly to evolution of technology, consumer preferences, and the evolution of business models, and the fact that people age out. The next generation comes in with no preference. All these people in Africa have zero preference to these types of things. Cardano, in some cases, their first cryptocurrency. So that's only valuable for a moment, and it gives you the ability to stay alive for that moment. It gives you the luxury of being able to make bets. But if you're too slow, you could lose out on the whole thing. There's a famous memo that Microsoft Research wrote in the 90s that basically Bill Gates commissioned. He said, tell me about the next 10 years. And in the memo, they predicted the rise of Google, Facebook, and the iPhone. So Microsoft had the means, the position, and the knowledge of where the future was, yet they missed all three.
Yeah.
So they were the Goliath $600 billion company, the largest tech company in the world at the time, and they had a monopoly, yet they weren't able to navigate. So network effect is only so good and only so powerful. And, oh, Google's so powerful. What if they lose the metaverse and everybody's on the spatial web? They're going to be contextually searching in a geolocational space. So they don't have to use the Google search engine to search. So it might be the case that 100% of desktop searches, cell phone searches, and other things are still done with Google. But what ends up happening is that people grow around them. That's what happened to Microsoft. They never lost the desktop war. They had near 95% installation on desktops and laptops, with Apple having the rest. But then everybody just started getting iPhones and Android phones and tablets and things. And it turned out the preferred computing device wasn't a laptop, and it wasn't a desktop. It was a cell phone and a tablet. And so now there are 4 times as many of those devices as there are Windows computers. So they never lost a customer, but they lost the war in that respect. So it's all about that type of growth curve. And you have to think about the next 5 years and 10 years. Where will people be using these things? For example, if you're an NFT guy, you have to be a credible metaverse player, because that's what's going to preserve NFTs. It's analogous to domain names in the web browser. So the web is infinite, but you need some scarcity there. So how about Microsoft.com, Google.com, these types of things? That's real estate in the web. And if you own it, it could be worth millions of dollars. Well, similarly, NFTs connected to a metaverse, that creates scarcity in an unlimited spatial world. And then suddenly you will have the equivalent of a Microsoft.com or that type of real estate in the metaverse. So if you're serious about NFTs, that's an area where you have to dominate in and do something good in. Has anybody succeeded in that yet? No. And new players are entering all the time, and there's no network effect there. And there's fundamentally different technology to be a good player there. And there's a great book called The Spatial Web that talks about that. Another is called The Infinite Retina that talks about it. That's just one example. If you talk about regulation, you need to win the identity war and the metadata war, because compliance is coming. How many people have a path to contingent staking to comply with the 2023 mandate in the infrastructure bill? We do. Our competitors don't. These things. So you have to think where the puck is going, where the future is going, if you want to exist in that world. And network effects rapidly and radically change based upon this emerging and changing landscape. VR AR is going to be fucking huge. Apple's entering this market. They have 5,000 engineers working on a headset called the KUO. 5,000. Probably 2023, 2024 is coming out. The minute that happens, Samsung's there. Microsoft's there. Everybody's going to be in that market. It's going to be in eyeglasses within the next 7 years. So the AR revolution is coming here. Everything's going to change with that. So where does your blockchain fit in this type of a thing? You see, who are the biggest adopters that will give you billions of customers? You ask, well, how do I get a billion? What if I got Microsoft on board? One client, 3.5 billion customers. What if it got built into Windows? You'd have it just right there. How do you get there? Well, what do they care about? Do they care about growth? No, they already own the whole market. They care about safety, compliance. They care about software quality, these types of things. We win there. Our competitors don't, because they focused on a JavaScript-esque .com move fast and break things model. And when regulation comes, who gets hit the hardest? The people who have no strategy and plan to accommodate for it. The ones who do, they win. So the game is not even close to over, and there's tons of things to do, and it's just all about what vision and philosophy you have 5 years, 10 years, 15 years out. Do you have a community that help you get there? And do you have the patience and appreciation to know when to strike and when to hold back and how to build as much as you have to when to grow and acquire? Like I get often asked, Joe Rogan effect, when are you going to get on it? Well, guys, if I got a Joe Rogan and we weren't ready for it, we'd have 11 million people say, oh, he's a real cool dude, or say he's a douchebag. But in any event, where do they go next? There's no funnel to capture them. So you just missed your greatest marketing opportunity in the history of the project. If you have a funnel, you can capture some of them, even 1%, 100,000 new users, right? So timing is very important in these things too, of how quickly do you roll things out. Cardano comes with a lot of responsibility. When you hold ADA, you're not passive. You're staking, you're delegating, you're voting, you're participating, you're building. There's a lot there. And so there are educational demands on the community, the voting demands, the democratic demands on that community to be a citizen in this Cardano nation are huge. Now, over time, those barriers to entry go down and the tools get better and so forth, but it takes time to get there. So if we suddenly got 10 million users, boy, that'd be a headache. But we're basically being told is you have to get them now or else you'll never get them. And I say, okay, well, I look at these roadmap competitors, the roadmaps of the competitors. I see nothing there that's capturing the future. I see the same predictable buzzwords again and again. TPS, infinitely scalable, rah, 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 rah. They just say stuff. Yeah. And then I see the protocol design, and I know they're going to have to rewrite the protocols like Ethereum has to, which means that the minute they admit that, they're going to go down the same road Ethereum's gone down, only they have less money and less time to do it, and not the same network effect to do it. And also, they don't have any of the engineers or scientists necessary to actually conceive of these protocols. So they're going to have to copy some of our stuff and people like Algorand stuff and so forth that actually thought about the future and have the engineers and the scientists. So how am I in a bad position if that's the case? You can disagree with it, okay. But then you have to honestly tell me, it's like, well, what is their strategy then? How are they going to get there and so forth? And they usually don't. They just talk about token price or performance or some vanity partnership with some, or they put their logo on a Formula One car, or they put their logo on a stadium or something, or subway car. Oh, look how smart we are. We paid a bunch of money to get some people to look at this, or we're running commercials with Matt Damon. We're getting it done. I've never run a commercial with Matt Damon.
No commercials yet, right?
No.
What the funnel you just talked about, right? In relation to going on Joe Rogan and getting that influx of people. What does that funnel look like? What do you envision that funnel looking like to be ready?
Okay, so there's what's good for me and my company, and then there's also what's good for Cardano. Because if I go on Rogan, I'm not just going to talk about Cardano. I would probably spend more time talking about other stuff than Cardano, because it's an interesting conversation. Talk about hunting and bison and mushrooms and all kinds of. It'll be fun. We'll break the all-time record. So what you need is a clear call to action. That if people are legitimately interested in the vision and philosophy of Cardano, first, you need to demonstrate you've actually done something. It's not just aspirational. So we have done a lot, but I'd like to be a little further along. For example, I'd like to have a fully functional stablecoin and peer-to-peer lending marketplace ready to go. So people, when they go, they can pull out their phone, download a beautiful mobile wallet, and then they can actually see right there a way to lend money to someone in Kenya or something like that. I'd like them to be able to create real-time an identity and use that in their workflow, this type of stuff. Now, there already are some ways to do this, and they're being used at scale of millions, but they're not user-friendly enough that an average Joe Rogan listener would want to do that. So that's an example of a benchmark. Then, the right websites, the right user experience with those. So when they go to cardano.org, they know exactly where to go, and they know exactly what route to take and where they can participate from, volunteer, what have you, better voting experience, these types of things. So a lot of user experience needs to be improved, and a lot of accessibility needs to be improved. And also the information needs a little bit more time to get refined and polished and made accessible and so forth. So those are examples of things that would go into that strategy. And then also it has to be relatable, because no one goes to a cryptocurrency if they're serious in a non-speculative way, unless there's something connected to a problem they want to solve. For example, let's say you're a doctor or a pharmaceutical researcher, and you're looking at electronic medical record system, you say, boy, I would love to have a system where I can find out how many asthma patients have COVID and what that compares to the regular population in terms of mortality. And I don't want it to do that, find that information by having to negotiate with a bunch of EMRs and have a data room and somebody actually see the de-anonymized data. I would like to just operate on encrypted data. Probably that in some way will be facilitated by a blockchain-based solution at some point. So that's an example of a real life problem. It has enormous commercial value, enormous research value, can't be solved at the moment. Or you as a consumer, let's say, you go on vacation and you have a lovely time in the Masai Mara in Kenya. You're on safari. Elephant charges the van, knocks it over. You get crushed. Your legs are broken. You're unconscious. They take you to the closest hospital they can find. Pretty grim story. And you're there, and they're trying to figure out your medical history. They don't even know your blood type. And how do they get your medical records? How did that get transmitted from wherever there's in the United States to there in Kenya, so they can actually know a little bit about you and hopefully treat you a little bit better? Well, they can't. There's no way to solve that problem right now in modern society, but you can solve that with a blockchain. So stuff like that, that's how you get people interested. Rogan, maybe he's not going to get any of this blockchain stuff, but he's a hunter. Every hunter has problems with hunting tax. Every hunter has problems with that whole area. That whole system can be put on a blockchain, made a hell of a lot more fair. You can go through that whole example of why it's better. And then once you do, he gets it. He says, oh, wow, that is really cool. Half of America thinks the elections are corrupted because of Trump. Whether you agree with that or not, doesn't matter. The perception of a lack of legitimacy destroys democracy. The solution is not to say those people are bad people and stupid, suck it up, buttercup, any more so than when the other side was saying that Russia stole the election for Trump, to tell them to suck it up. You restore legitimacy by adopting new systems that have inclusive accountability. So why don't you talk about how a voting system would work where you can check your own vote, make sure it's been counted, and it's transnational, meaning that a government can't tamper with it or a private company can't tamper with it or something like that. You don't have to trust somebody. You can check yourself and you have assurance for that. Turns out the same problem to make sure you have money on a blockchain is to make sure there's a vote there, because votes can be tokens, right? So that kind of way, I think, is what you need. And you need really well-developed, crystallized talking points, use cases, and experiences to drag people there. And and that's why I kept saying Rogan after Gogan, because that's where those really well-developed things start crystallizing. And what I can do is act as an advertiser in chief for the ecosystem. It'd be real boring if I talked about myself. How about I talk about, hey, there's this great project that's doing this, and there's this great project doing this. And then suddenly these small projects get, an 11 million person audience now looking at them, going to their website. Will crash all their websites. If I crash their websites, I'm the happiest guy in the world. And so I want to get to that point. So it's not just about our progress and where we think the funnel needs to be. We need to give the ecosystem a little bit of time to mature to a point where they can really showcase the value that they've created